The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Caldwell's penthouse office. He stood there, looking down at the city below, holding a coffee cup that cost more than what most people made in an hour. At 45, he had everything money could buy: custom suits, luxury cars, a mansion in the Hamptons, and the most successful real estate company in New York. But money couldn't buy peace of mind. And it definitely couldn't erase the constant ringing of his phone, showing his ex-wife Claire's number for the 5th time that morning. "Mr. Caldwell," his assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Your son's doctor is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Ethan's hand tightened around the coffee cup. Oliver, his 5-year-old son, the boy who loved dinosaurs and could spend hours making up songs on his tiny guitar. "Tell him I'm in a meeting," Ethan said, not turning around. "But sir, Dr. Peterson says—" "I said I'm in a meeting." The words came out sharper than he intended, making Sarah flinch. After she left, Ethan loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. It was barely 10 in the morning, but lately the scotch had become his closest friend. He tried to focus on the contracts on his desk, on the upcoming board meeting, on anything except the gnawing fear in his gut. The door burst open. Claire stood there, her face tear-stained, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. "You coward," she said, her voice shaking. "You absolute coward. Our son has cancer and you won't even answer the phone." The word hit him like a physical blow. Cancer. The thing he'd been dreading since the first time Oliver had gotten those mysterious bruises, since the fatigue that wouldn't go away, since the nosebleeds that kept getting worse. "Claire, I have a meeting to stop." She slammed her hands on his desk. "Stop hiding behind your meetings and your deals and your empire. Oliver needs his father. He's scared and he's asking for you, and you're here pretending nothing's wrong." Ethan turned to face the window again, his reflection showing a man he barely recognized. "What do you want me to do, Claire? I can't fix this. I can't buy his way out of this. I can't—" "You can be there for him," Claire said, her voice softening. "That's all he needs. Just be his dad." But Ethan Caldwell, the man who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who could stare down the toughest competitors, who never showed weakness, that man was terrified. The thought of watching his son, his perfect little boy, suffer through chemotherapy, possibly die. No, he couldn't do it. "I'll make sure you have access to the best doctors," he said, his voice mechanical. "Whatever it costs, I'll pay for everything." Claire stared at him, realization dawning in her eyes. "You're not coming to the hospital, are you?" "I have meetings all week. The Anderson deal." "Stop." This time the word was quiet, final. "Just stop. You know what, Ethan? Keep your money, keep your empire, keep hiding in this tower of yours. But remember this moment. Remember that when your son needed you most, you chose to be a coward." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "He wrote you a new song yesterday, you know, on that little guitar you bought him for Christmas. He was so excited to play it. For you." After she left, Ethan stood there for a long time looking at the city below. Then he did what he always did when things got too hard. He buried himself in work. He scheduled more meetings, made more deals, stayed later at the office. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. His assistant kept him updated on Oliver's condition. The start of chemotherapy, the hospital stays, the good days and bad days. Ethan sent money, arranged for the best medical care, hired the top specialists. But he never visited, never called, never saw how his son's bright smile dimmed a little more each time someone asked where his daddy was. Never heard the songs Oliver kept writing, his small fingers strumming that guitar, even when they were weak from treatment. Instead, Ethan built his walls higher. He moved to a new office, changed his phone number, avoided any place where he might run into Claire or hear news about Oliver. He told himself it was better this way, that he was protecting himself, that he couldn't bear to watch his son suffer. But late at night, in his empty penthouse, with only a glass of scotch for company, he would look at old photos on his phone. Oliver on his shoulders at the zoo, Oliver playing his first chord on the guitar, Oliver grinning with missing front teeth, proudly holding up a drawing of their family. And in those quiet moments, Ethan Caldwell, the man who had everything, would realize just how much he had lost. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan Caldwell's penthouse office. He stood there looking down at the city below, holding a coffee cup that cost more than what most people made in an hour. At 45, he had everything money could buy. Custom suits, luxury cars, a mansion in the Hamptons, and the most successful real estate company in New York. But money couldn't buy peace of mind. And it definitely couldn't erase the constant ringing of his phone, showing his ex-wife Claire's number for the 5th time that morning. "Mr. Caldwell," his assistant Sarah poked her head in. "Your son's doctor is on line 1. He says it's urgent." Ethan's hand tightened around the coffee cup. Oliver, his 5-year-old son. The boy who loved dinosaurs and could spend hours making up songs on his tiny guitar. "Tell him I'm in a meeting," Ethan said, not turning around. "But sir, Dr. Peterson says—" "I said I'm in a meeting." The words came out sharper than he intended, making Sarah flinch. After she left, Ethan loosened his tie and poured himself a drink. It was barely 10 in the morning, but lately, the scotch had become his closest friend. He tried to focus on the contracts on his desk, on the upcoming board meeting, on anything except the gnawing fear in his gut. The door burst open. Claire stood there, her face tear-stained, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. "You coward," she said, her voice shaking. "You absolute coward. Our son has cancer and you won't even answer the phone." The word hit him like a physical blow. Cancer. The thing he'd been dreading since the first time Oliver had gotten those mysterious bruises, since the fatigue that wouldn't go away, since the nosebleeds that kept getting worse. "Claire, I have a meeting." "Stop!" She slammed her hands on his desk. "Stop hiding behind your meetings and your deals and your empire. Oliver needs his father. He's scared, and he's asking for you, and you're here pretending nothing's wrong." Ethan turned to face the window again, his reflection showing a man he barely recognized. "What do you want me to do, Claire? I can't fix this. I can't buy his way out of this. I can't—" "You can be there for him," Claire said, her voice softening. "That's all he needs. Just be his dad." But Ethan Caldwell, the man who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who could stare down the toughest competitors, who never showed weakness, that man was terrified. The thought of watching his son, his perfect little boy, suffer through chemotherapy, possibly die— No, he couldn't do it. "I'll make sure you have access to the best doctors," he said, his voice mechanical. "Whatever it costs, I'll pay for everything." Claire stared at him, realization dawning in her eyes. "You're not coming to the hospital, are you?" "I have meetings all week, the Anderson deal." "Stop." This time the word was quiet, final. "Just stop. You know what, Ethan? Keep your money, keep your empire, keep hiding in this tower of yours. But remember this moment. Remember that when your son needed you most, you chose to be a coward." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "He wrote you a new song yesterday, you know, on that little guitar you bought him for Christmas. He was so excited to play it for you." After she left, Ethan stood there for a long time looking at the city below. Then he did what he always did when things got too hard. He buried himself in work. He scheduled more meetings, made more deals, stayed later at the office. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. His assistant kept him updated on Oliver's condition, the start of chemotherapy, the hospital stays, the good days and bad days. Ethan sent money, arranged for the best medical care, hired the top specialists, but he never visited, never called, never saw how his son's bright smile dimmed a little more each time someone asked where his daddy was, never heard the songs Oliver kept writing, his small fingers strumming that guitar even when they were weak from treatment. Instead, Ethan built his walls higher. He moved to a new office, changed his phone number, avoided any place where he might run into Claire or hear news about Oliver. He told himself it was better this way, that he was protecting himself, that he couldn't bear to watch his son suffer. But late at night, in his empty penthouse with only a glass of scotch for company, he would look at old photos on his phone. Oliver on his shoulders at the zoo, Oliver playing his first chord on the guitar, Oliver grinning with missing front teeth, proudly holding up a drawing of their family. And in those quiet moments, Ethan Caldwell, the man who had everything, would realize just how much he had lost. 2 years passed like a blur. Ethan's company grew bigger, his bank account got fatter, but his heart grew colder. The other parents at his country club bragged about their kids' baseball games and dance recitals. Ethan would just drink his scotch and walk away. Life had become a routine. Wake up, work, drink, sleep, repeat. His huge penthouse felt emptier than ever, especially on Sunday mornings when he used to make pancakes with Oliver. The little guitar he'd kept in his office closet gathered dust, a reminder of everything he'd thrown away. One rainy Tuesday evening, Ethan sat in his living room, mindlessly flipping through TV channels. The usual stuff: reality shows, news, cooking programs. He was about to turn it off when something made him freeze. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the TV host announced, we have a very special guest tonight, 7-year-old Oliver Caldwell. Ethan's glass of scotch slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor, but he didn't even notice. His eyes were glued to the screen. There was his son walking onto the stage of America's Rising Stars. Oliver looked small under the bright lights, his body thin from the treatments, but he walked with determination, carrying a guitar that seemed almost too big for him. The camera panned to the audience, showing Claire sitting in the front row. She looked tired but proud, wearing the same pearl necklace Ethan had given her on their 5th anniversary. "Oliver, I understand you wrote a special song," the host said, kneeling down to Oliver's level. "Can you tell us about it?" Oliver nodded, his small fingers gripping the guitar. "I wrote it for my dad," he said, his voice clear and strong. "He had to go away when I got sick. But I want him to know I'm getting better, and I still remember him." The audience let out a collective "aww." Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. "Mom says maybe he'll hear it if I sing it on TV," Oliver continued. "So I practiced really hard." Claire wiped tears from her eyes, and Ethan noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring anymore. Of course she wasn't. Their divorce had been finalized a year ago. Though he'd let his lawyers handle everything, Oliver began to strum the guitar, and Ethan recognized the basic chords he'd taught him what felt like a lifetime ago. Then his son started to sing, his young voice filling the room. "Do you still remember me, or did you leave me in a dream? I waited where you left me last, but you never turned to see." The words hit Ethan like punches to the gut. His son's voice, singing about being left behind, about waiting for a father who never came back. The audience was silent, many wiping away tears. "The doctors say I'm winning, though sometimes I feel weak, but I keep playing music because that's how my heart speaks." Ethan stumbled to his feet, nearly stepping on the broken glass. He couldn't take his eyes off the screen. Oliver looked so much like him, the same dark hair, the same determined set of the jaw. But there was a strength in his son's eyes that Ethan had never possessed. "And if you're watching, Daddy, I hope you're doing fine. I'm keeping safe the memories. And this song I made is mine." The camera showed people in the audience crying openly now. A tough-looking guy in a leather jacket was sobbing into his hands. Claire sat straight-backed, tears streaming down her face, but smiling with fierce pride. "I'm not angry that you left. Just miss you every day. And if you ever want to come back, I've got more songs to play." As Oliver played the final chords, the audience erupted in applause. The host had tears in her eyes as she hugged him. "That was beautiful, Oliver. Just beautiful." "And you wrote that all by yourself?" Oliver nodded. "My dad taught me the guitar before he left. I practice every day, even in the hospital. The nurses say I'm getting really good." "You certainly are," the host agreed. "And how are you feeling now? Your mom tells us you've been very brave." "The doctors say I'm doing better," Oliver said, his chin lifted proudly. "I still have to take medicine and go to the hospital sometimes, but I'm not as sick anymore. Mum says I'm a fighter." Claire came up to the stage then, wrapping her arms around their son. The host turned to her. "Mrs. Caldwell, you must be so proud." "I am," Claire said, her voice steady. "Oliver never gave up. Not on his health, not on his music, not on anything. He's the strongest person I know." Ethan sat in his dark penthouse, surrounded by all his expensive furniture and meaningless luxury, watching his ex-wife and the son he'd abandoned receive a standing ovation on national television. Oliver had turned his pain into something beautiful, while Ethan had turned his fear into walls. The show cut to commercial, but Ethan kept staring at the screen. His phone started ringing, probably his business partners who'd recognized Oliver's last name. But for the first time in 2 years, Ethan Caldwell, the man who always knew what to do, had no idea what his next move should be. The morning after Oliver's TV performance, Ethan didn't go to work. For the first time in years, he called in sick. His phone kept buzzing with messages and calls, but he ignored them all. He sat in his bathrobe watching the replay of the show over and over on his tablet. Each time, he noticed something new, the way Oliver's hospital bracelet peeked out from under his sleeve. The small scar on his neck from the chemotherapy port. The slight tremor in his hands before he started playing, not from fear, but from the lingering weakness of his treatments. Around noon, his sister Rachel barged into his penthouse, using the emergency key he'd given her years ago. "You absolute jerk," she said, throwing her purse on his expensive couch. "I saw the show last night. The whole country saw it. Your son, the son you abandoned, just broke America's heart on national television." Ethan couldn't even look at her. "Rachel, not now." "Yes, now." She grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. "Do you know what happened after that show aired? Oliver's story went viral. It's all over social media. People are trying to find out who you are, why you left, how a father could abandon his sick child." That got his attention. "What?" Rachel pulled out her phone and started reading comments. "This brave little boy deserves better than a coward for a father. Someone find this dad and make him watch this. I'm crying my eyes out. This child's strength is incredible." She threw her phone on the coffee table. "They're calling him the little songwriter. Ellen wants him on her show. Good Morning America called Claire this morning." Ethan ran his hands through his unwashed hair. "I didn't know. I didn't think." "That's right, you didn't think," Rachel snapped. "You didn't think about anyone but yourself, and now your son, your brave, talented, dying son—" "He's not dying," Ethan interrupted. "He said on the show he's getting better." "Oh, so you did. Watch it. Did you hear him say he's not angry at you? Did you hear him say he's keeping your memories safe? Did you see how he still loves you, even though you don't deserve it?" Ethan got up and walked to the window, his usual escape. But this time Rachel wasn't having it. She grabbed his arm and forced him to face her. "Claire called me last night," she said, her voice softer now. "Oliver's been asking about you more since the show aired. He thinks maybe you'll see it and come back." "I can't just walk back into his life," Ethan whispered. "It's been 2 years. You're right, you can't just walk back in. You'll have to crawl. You'll have to beg. You'll have to prove you deserve a second chance." She picked up her purse and headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and one more thing. Oliver has a big doctor's appointment tomorrow. They're doing tests to see if he's really in remission. Claire didn't want to tell you, but I think you should know. It's at St. Mary's Children's Hospital, 10 in the morning. After Rachel left, Ethan finally looked at his phone. Hundreds of messages, missed calls, emails. His PR team wanting to know how to handle the situation. Business partners asking if he was that Caldwell. Reporters trying to get a statement. But one message caught his eye. It was from an unknown number sent late last night. "He plays that guitar you gave him every single day, even when his fingers hurt too much to press the strings properly. He never gave up on you. Claire." Ethan walked to his home office and opened the closet. In the back, behind hanging garment bags, was a small cardboard box. Inside were all the things he'd hidden away 2 years ago. Photos of Oliver, Father's Day cards, the tiny handprint in clay from preschool. At the bottom was a DVD labeled Oliver's. First song, age 4. His hands shaking, Ethan put it into his laptop. The video showed Oliver sitting on their old living room floor, tongue sticking out in concentration, as he tried to play the guitar that was much too big for him. "Daddy, Daddy, look," the Oliver in the video called out. "I made up a song." The camera shook as past Ethan laughed. "Let's hear it, buddy." Oliver strummed randomly, making a terrible noise, but sang with complete confidence. "I love my daddy because he teaches me guitar and makes good pancakes and is the best daddy by far." The video ended with past Ethan scooping Oliver up in his arms, both of them laughing. Current Ethan sat there, tears falling onto his keyboard, remembering how simple everything had been back then. How perfect. He looked at his watch. It was 6 in the evening. 16 hours until Oliver's doctor's appointment. 16 hours to decide if he was finally ready to stop being a coward. His phone buzzed again with another message from his PR team. "Mr. Caldwell, we need to issue a statement about the situation. The press is starting to camp outside the office building. How do you want to handle this?" Ethan stared at the message for a long time. Then he did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He opened his contacts and scrolled to Claire's new number. His finger hovered over the call button as the sun set over New York City, painting his lonely penthouse in shades of orange and gold. In the background, his TV was still playing quietly. Another replay of the show, another chance to hear his son's song, another reminder of everything he'd thrown away and everything he might still have a chance to fix. The next morning, Ethan sat in his car in the St. Mary's Children's Hospital parking lot. He'd been there for an hour watching families come and go. Some kids were in wheelchairs, others were bald from chemotherapy. All of them had someone holding their hands, mothers, fathers, grandparents. Nobody walked alone. His phone showed 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes until Oliver's appointment. "I can't do this," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel. But then he remembered Oliver's voice from the TV show. "I'm not angry that you left, I just miss you every day." Taking a deep breath, Ethan got out of his car. He'd dressed casually today, no designer suit, no expensive watch, just jeans and a sweater, like the dad he used to be. The hospital entrance felt a million miles away. Each step was harder than the last. A group of reporters had gathered near the doors, probably hoping to catch Oliver after his TV appearance. Ethan kept his head down and slipped past them. Inside, the children's ward was painted with bright colors and cartoon characters. A nurse at the station looked up as he approached. I'm looking for..." The word stuck in his throat. "Sir, can I help you?" "Oliver Caldwell," he finally managed. "He has an appointment at 10. The nurse's eyes widened with recognition. Everyone had seen the show by now. Oh, you're..." "His father," Ethan said quietly. It felt strange saying those words after so long. "Is he here yet?" Before the nurse could answer, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "What are you doing here?" Claire stood there, holding Oliver's favorite dinosaur backpack. She looked tired, but fierce, like a mother lion protecting her cub. Ethan struggled to find the right words. "Rachel told me about the appointment. I wanted..." 2 years, Claire said, her voice low and angry. 2 years of silence. 2 years of Oliver asking why his daddy doesn't visit him in the hospital. 2 years of watching him play that guitar until his fingers bled, hoping you'd somehow hear him. And now you just show up? "Mum?" a small voice called from down the hall. "Mum, I can't find my lucky guitar pick." Ethan's heart stopped. Oliver came around the corner, still looking in his backpack. He was taller than on TV, but so thin. His baseball cap couldn't quite hide his patchy hair, still growing back from treatments. "It's okay, honey," Claire called back, her voice instantly gentle. "We'll find it." Then Oliver looked up. His eyes met Ethan's. The world seemed to freeze. Oliver's backpack slipped from his hands, spilling books and toys across the floor. But neither of them moved to pick them up. "Daddy," Oliver whispered, like he wasn't sure if he was dreaming. Ethan felt tears running down his face. "Hi, buddy." Oliver took one step forward, then stopped, looking uncertainly at his mother. Claire's face was a storm of emotions: anger, fear, protection, uncertainty. Did you see me on TV?" Oliver asked, his voice small. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "Did you like my song?" "I loved it," Ethan managed to say. "You've gotten so good at guitar." "I practice every day," Oliver said proudly. Then his face fell a little. "I wrote lots of other songs too, but nobody could hear them." Each word was like a knife in Ethan's heart. He took a step forward, then stopped when he saw Claire tense up. "Oliver," a new voice called. Dr. Peterson stood in the doorway of an exam room, his face showing surprise at seeing Ethan. "It's time for your tests." Oliver looked torn, glancing between his mother and the father he hadn't seen in 2 years. "Go on, honey," Claire said softly. "Dr. Peterson needs to check if you're still getting better. Will you?" Oliver looked at Ethan, hope and fear mixed in his eyes. "Will you still be here when I'm done?" Ethan felt the weight of that question, not just about today, but about all the days to come. He looked at Claire, silently asking permission. She gave him a long, hard look, then turned to Oliver. "Your father can wait in the family room while you have your tests, if that's what you want." Oliver's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Claire said, though her eyes warned Ethan this wasn't forgiveness, just a chance he'd better not waste. As Oliver followed Dr. Peterson into the exam room, he turned back one last time. "Daddy, I brought my guitar. Maybe later, I could play you my other songs?" Ethan wiped his eyes. "I'd like that very much, buddy." After the door closed, Claire turned to him. "This isn't for you," she said firmly. "This is for him. One wrong move, one sign that you're going to hurt him again, and I don't care how many lawyers you have, you'll never see him again. Understand?" Ethan nodded. "I understand." "The family room's down that hall," she said, pointing. "I'll be with Oliver during his tests. They take about an hour." As Claire walked away, Ethan noticed Oliver's backpack still spilled on the floor. He knelt down to pick up the scattered items, a comic book, a small tablet, some action figures. At the bottom, he found what Oliver had been looking for, a guitar pick. It was worn and scratched, and Ethan recognized it. It was the one he'd given Oliver when he bought him his first guitar. His son had kept it all this time. His lucky guitar pick. Ethan clutched it in his hand as he walked to the family room, knowing the next hour would feel like the longest of his life. In his pocket, his phone kept buzzing with messages from his office, from reporters, from his PR team. But for the first time in 2 years, none of that seemed important. All that mattered was a little boy in an exam room down the hall and the songs he'd been saving for his father to hear. The family waiting room at St. Mary's was full of worried parents, but nobody bothered Ethan. He sat alone in a corner, turning Oliver's lucky guitar pick over and over in his hands. On the TV mounted on the wall, a morning show was talking about Oliver's performance from the night before. Ethan quickly asked a nurse to change the channel. The hour crawled by. Ethan watched other families get good news and bad news. A mother cried happy tears when her daughter's tests came back clear. An elderly couple held each other as a doctor spoke to them in hushed tones. The room was full of love and fear and hope, all the emotions he'd run away from 2 years ago. Finally, Claire appeared in the doorway. Her face was unreadable. "Oliver's asking for you," she said. "But first, we need to talk." She led him to a small garden area outside the pediatric ward. Children's artwork decorated the walls. Pictures of sunshine and flowers drawn by little hands fighting big battles. "The tests look good," Claire said, sitting on a bench. "Dr. Peterson thinks Oliver might be in full remission soon." Relief flooded through Ethan. "That's wonderful news." "Yes, no thanks to you." Claire's words were sharp. "Do you know what got him through the worst days? His music. He'd sit in that hospital bed, sick from chemo, still trying to play that guitar. The nurses would come in just to hear him practice." Ethan sat heavily on the bench, keeping his distance from Claire. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am so sorry." "You're right. It's not enough." Claire looked at him directly. "Oliver's been through hell. He lost his hair, his strength, nearly lost his life, but he never lost his hope. Even when the doctors were worried, even when I was terrified, he kept saying his daddy would come back when he got better." Tears rolled down Claire's cheeks. "Do you know what it's like, watching your child suffer and still believe in someone who abandoned him? Having to smile when he said you'd return, knowing you were just hiding in your tower." "I was a coward," Ethan admitted. I couldn't watch him." "Watch him what? Fight, survive, prove he's stronger than you'll ever be?" Claire wiped her eyes angrily. "He's in room 302. He's been showing his nurses the video of his TV performance all morning, telling them his daddy might come see him today. Don't you dare disappoint him again." She stood up. "I'll give you some time alone with him. The social worker suggested short visits at first, so you have 15 minutes. If he gets tired, it's over immediately. If he gets upset, it's over immediately. If you do or say anything to hurt him—" "I understand," Ethan said quietly. Claire started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and Ethan," He brought his guitar. He has 2 years' worth of songs he wrote for you. You're going to sit there and listen to every single one of them, even if they break your heart. It's the least you can do. Ethan found room 302 easily. It was the one with colorful cards and drawings taped all over the door. He knocked softly. "Come in," Oliver's voice called out. The room was bright and cheerful, with space-themed wallpaper and a window overlooking the garden. Oliver sat cross-legged on his bed, his guitar in his lap. His face lit up when he saw Ethan. "You stayed. Mom said you might, but I wasn't sure." "I stayed," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. He held up the guitar pick. "I found this in your backpack." "My lucky pick." Oliver grabbed it happily. "I thought I lost it. I always use it when I play. It helps me remember when you taught me my first chords." He patted the edge of his bed. "Want to hear my songs? I wrote lots and lots. Some are happy and some are sad and some are just about stuff like pizza and my pet fish and the nice nurse who brings me extra jello." Ethan sat down carefully, noticing the IV line in Oliver's arm, the medication schedule on the wall, the stuffed dinosaur that had been his son's constant companion since he was 3. "I'd love to hear them all," he said. Oliver beamed and started, tuning his guitar. His fingers were thin but sure on the strings. "This one's called Hospital Food Blues. I wrote it when they kept giving me green jello instead of red jello." As Oliver started to play, Ethan noticed little things he'd missed on TV. The way his son stuck his tongue out slightly when concentrating, just like he used to. The way he tapped his foot in time with the music. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled just like Claire's. The song was simple and funny, with lyrics about how green jello should be illegal and chocolate pudding should be served for breakfast. Oliver's voice was stronger in person than it had been on TV, and his guitar playing had improved tremendously. "That was wonderful," Ethan said when the song ended. "You've been practicing hard." "Every day," Oliver nodded. "Even when I was really sick, I would just hold my guitar and make up songs in my head. The doctors said music therapy is good for getting better." He started playing another chord progression, this one more melancholic. "This next one is called Daddy's Empty Chair. I wrote it last Christmas when—" Oliver's voice trailed off, and for the first time, Ethan saw uncertainty in his son's eyes. The weight of those 2 lost years hung between them like a heavy curtain. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "I want to hear it. I want to hear everything I missed." Oliver took a deep breath and began to play. This song was different from the Jello song. It was full of longing and questions and love that had nowhere to go. As Ethan listened to his son's pure voice singing about empty chairs at holiday dinners and unused tickets to school concerts, he finally understood the full measure of what his cowardice had cost. But here was his son, offering him song after song, building a bridge across those 2 lost years with nothing but hope and music and a worn-out guitar pick. The next few days turned Ethan's world upside down. He cancelled all his meetings, ignored his business calls, and spent every allowed moment at the hospital. Claire set strict visiting hours, 2 hours in the morning, 2 in the afternoon. It wasn't nearly enough, but Ethan knew he had no right to ask for more. The media circus outside the hospital grew bigger each day. Everyone wanted to interview the little boy who touched America's hearts, and now they wanted the story of his father's return. Claire handled it all with grace, protecting Oliver from too much attention. "Mr. Thompson?" A nurse stopped Ethan one morning as he headed to Oliver's room. "Your son asked for his keyboard to be brought in today. He says he has a surprise for you." Ethan found Oliver sitting up in bed, a small electronic keyboard across his lap. His face was flushed with excitement. "Daddy, Miss Jenny's been teaching me piano." Oliver's fingers danced across the keys, playing a simple melody. "She comes every Tuesday and Thursday. She says I'm a natural." "Miss Jenny?" Ethan asked. "She's the music therapist," Claire said from the doorway, where she always watched their visits. "She's been working with Oliver since his first round of chemo." Oliver nodded eagerly. "She helped me write all my songs, and guess what? She sent my TV performance to her friend at the Children's Hospital in Boston. They want me to play for the kids there." Ethan saw Claire tense up. "Oliver, honey, we talked about this. You're not strong enough for traveling yet." "But Mum, they're sick like I was. My songs could make them feel better. Oliver's face lit up with an idea. Dad could take us. He has a private plane, right? You always said he had a private plane. The hope in Oliver's voice made Ethan's heart ache. He looked at Claire, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. Maybe when you're stronger. Buddy, Ethan said gently, right now you need to focus on getting better. Oliver's face fell slightly, but he rallied quickly. Okay, but will you come to my hospital concert next week? I'm playing for all the kids in the cancer ward. Miss Jenny says it's my first real concert. I wouldn't miss it for anything, Ethan promised. Later that afternoon, Claire found Ethan in the hospital cafeteria. She sat down across from him, looking tired but determined. We need to talk about expectations, she said. Both yours and Oliver's. Ethan put down his coffee. I know I have no right to... This isn't about rights, Claire interrupted. This is about what's best for Oliver. He's getting attached again. He's making plans, big plans. And I need to know if you're going to disappear again when things get hard. I won't, Ethan said firmly. I know I can never make up for what I did, but I'm here now for everything. Claire pulled out her phone and showed him a news article. The headline read, Thompson Industries stock plummets as CEO goes AWOL. Your company is suffering, she said. Your board members are talking about a vote of no confidence. Are you ready to lose everything you built? Because that's what it might take. Oliver's recovery isn't a straight line. There will be setbacks, hospital stays, bad days. The company doesn't matter, Ethan said. None of it matters compared to him. Easy to say now, Claire replied. But what about when he's too tired to play guitar? When he's sick from treatments? When he's angry and scared and needs his father to be strong for him? Before Ethan could answer, they heard commotion in the hallway. A nurse ran past their table. Code Blue, Pediatric Oncology. Claire was on her feet instantly. That's Oliver's floor. They raced to the elevator, but it was too slow. They took the stairs 2 at a time, Claire leading the way. The halls were full of running medical staff. Room 302, the patient was fine a minute ago, someone called out. Ethan's heart stopped. Room 302. Oliver's room. They reached the doorway to find Dr. Peterson leaning over Oliver's bed. The keyboard lay forgotten on the floor. Oliver was having a seizure, his small body shaking uncontrollably. What's happening? Claire cried, trying. To get to their son, a nurse held her back. His fever spiked suddenly, Dr. Peterson said, his voice calm but urgent. We need to get him to ICU, now. As they wheeled Oliver's bed out, Ethan caught a glimpse of his son's face. Pale, eyes rolled back, nothing like the bright boy who'd been playing piano just hours ago. This is what I'm talking about, Claire said, her voice breaking as they watched the medical team race Oliver down the hall. This is what it means to be his father. Can you handle it? Really handle it? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could do was stand there, watching his worst fears come to life, feeling that old urge to run away. But this time something was different. This time he stayed. Hours passed in the ICU waiting room. Claire paced. Ethan sat perfectly still, Oliver's lucky guitar pick clutched in his hand so tight it left marks on his palm. Finally, Dr. Peterson emerged looking exhausted. The seizure was caused by an infection, he explained. We've started him on antibiotics. He's stable now, but this is a setback. We'll need to postpone the remission announcement. Can we see him? Claire asked. The doctor nodded. He's asking for both of you, and he smiled slightly. He wants to know if someone can bring his guitar to ICU. He says he has a new song about what happened. Through her tears, Claire let out a small laugh. Even now, he wants to make music. She looked at Ethan, really looked at him for the first time since he'd returned. Are you still here? Ethan stood up, his legs shaky but his voice firm. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. The ICU was different at night, quieter, but somehow more intense. Ethan sat beside Oliver's bed, listening to the steady beep of monitors. Claire had finally agreed to go home for a few hours of sleep, but only after Oliver insisted he wanted daddy time. Are you sure you won't leave again? Oliver asked suddenly, his voice small in the dimly lit room. The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Ethan leaned forward, taking his son's thin hand. I'm not going anywhere, buddy, I promise. But what if I get really sick again? Oliver's fingers tightened around his father's. What if I can't play guitar for a long time? Will you still want to hear my songs? Oliver, look at me. Ethan waited until his son's eyes met his. I was wrong before. I was scared and stupid and wrong, but I'm not scared anymore. Well, that's not true. I'm still scared, but now I'm more scared of missing another minute with you than anything else. Oliver seemed to think about this. Pinky promise? Pinky promise. Ethan linked his little finger with Oliver's. And you. Know what? While you're getting better, maybe we could write a song together. Oliver's face lit up despite his exhaustion. Really? You've never written a song before? Well, I have a pretty good teacher now, don't I? Just then, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Marcus, his company's board chairman. He'd been calling non-stop for days. Ethan switched the phone off without answering. Was that work? Oliver asked. Mom says you have a really important job. Nothing's more important than being here with you. Oliver yawned, the medication making him drowsy. Dad, can you tell me a story about when I was little? Ethan smiled, remembering bedtime stories from what felt like a lifetime ago. How about the time you decided to give your stuffed dinosaur a bath in my coffee? Oliver giggled weakly. Rex still smells like coffee sometimes. As Ethan told the story, he noticed Oliver fighting to keep his eyes open. Get some sleep, buddy. I'll be here when you wake up. Promise? Promise. Soon Oliver drifted off, still holding his father's hand. Ethan sat there watching his son sleep when he heard footsteps behind him. You're still here? It was Rachel carrying 2 cups of coffee. Where else would I be? She handed him a cup. The board called me. They're voting tomorrow morning. Marcus says if you don't show up, you'll lose the company. Let them have it. Rachel sat in the other chair. Ethan, you spent 15 years building that company, and I spent 2 years hiding in it while my son fought for his life. Ethan took a sip of coffee. I'm not making that mistake again. What will you do? Whatever I have to. Sell my shares, start over, I don't care. Oliver needs me here. Rachel studied her brother's face. You've changed. He changed me. Ethan looked at his sleeping son. You should hear his songs, Rachel. Even the sad ones are full of hope. He never gave up on me even when I gave up on myself. The next morning, Claire returned to find both father and son asleep. Oliver in his hospital bed, Ethan still holding his hand, a notebook open on his lap with scribbled song lyrics. She was about to wake them when Dr. Peterson appeared with test results. His face was serious. Claire, we need to talk about Oliver's treatment plan. The infection is more resistant than we thought. We might need to consider more aggressive options. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. But he was doing so well. Cancer recovery isn't linear, the doctor said gently. We'll need to postpone his hospital concert, and he might need to stay in ICU longer than we planned. The concert. Oliver's weak voice came from the bed. He was awake, and so was Ethan. But all the other kids are counting on me. Honey, you need to rest, Claire started. No. Oliver tried to sit up, setting off one of the monitors. I promised them. They're sick. Like me, and my songs make them feel better. Ethan squeezed his son's hand. Hey, buddy, what if we did something different? What if we recorded your songs right here in your room? We could make a special video for all the kids in the hospital. Oliver's eyes widened. Could we really? I know some people who could bring in good recording equipment, Ethan said. If it's okay with your mom and Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson considered it. As long as we maintain sterile conditions and Oliver doesn't overexert himself, it might actually be good therapy. Claire watched the hope return to Oliver's face and found herself nodding. Okay, but only for a little while each day, and you have to rest between songs. Can we start now? Oliver asked excitedly. I wrote a new song last night when Daddy was sleeping. It's called Pinky Promises and Coffee Dinosaurs. Despite the worry about the infection, despite the uncertainty ahead, despite everything, Claire found herself smiling. Because there was her son still making music, and there was his father, finally being the dad Oliver had always believed he could be. First, you need to take your medicine and eat some breakfast, Claire said. Then maybe, if you're strong enough, you can show your father how to write his first song. As if on cue, Ethan's phone buzzed again. The board meeting would start in an hour. 15 years of work hanging in the balance. But Ethan didn't even look at the phone. Instead, he pulled out Oliver's lucky guitar pick and handed it to his son. "I think we're going to need this for our recording session." Oliver clutched the pick tightly. "Dad, even if I can't play for a while, will you still tell me stories about when I was little?" "Every single one I can remember," Ethan promised, "and then we'll make new stories together." Outside the ICU, the morning sun was rising over the city. In boardrooms and offices, important people were making important decisions about the fate of Thompson Industries. But in room 507 of the ICU, none of that mattered, because a father and son were writing a song together, and some things were worth more than all the companies in the world. A week passed in the ICU. The recording equipment Ethan brought in turned Oliver's hospital room into a tiny studio. Despite his weakness, Oliver insisted on recording at least one song each day. The nurses started calling it the ICU sessions. "Mr. Thompson?" A nurse poked her head in one afternoon. "There are some men in suits insisting on seeing you. They say it's about the company." Ethan was helping Oliver adjust his guitar strings. "Tell them I'm busy. They're saying something about a hostile takeover." Before Ethan could respond, Marcus stormed into the room, followed by two lawyers. His face was red with anger. "Have you lost your mind?" Marcus shouted. "Davis Industries is buying up our shares. We're about to lose everything we built." Oliver shrank back in his bed, frightened by the loud voice. Claire, who had been reading in the corner, immediately stepped between Marcus and the bed. "This is a hospital room," she said firmly. "Lower your voice or leave." Marcus ignored her. "Ethan, the board removed you as CEO this morning. Davis is making his move. If you don't come back now, it's all over. Get out." Ethan's voice was quiet, but steel hard. "What?" "I said get out." Ethan stood up. "My son is sick. He's fighting an infection, and you're in here yelling about money." "It's not just money," Marcus protested. "It's your life's work." "No." Ethan looked at Oliver, who was clutching his guitar like a shield. "This is my life's work, right here, and I already wasted 2 years of it." "Dad," Oliver's voice was small, "are you in trouble because of me?" Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "No, buddy, I'm finally doing something right because of you." Marcus threw up his hands. "You're throwing away $1 billion company for this." The room went deadly quiet. Claire's eyes flashed with fury, but before she could speak, Oliver's weak voice filled the silence. "I wrote a song about money once," he said. Everyone turned to look at him. "Want to hear it?" Without waiting for an answer, Oliver started strumming his guitar. His voice was shaky but determined. "Some people think that money makes them tall, but all their dollars just build a wall. They can't see what matters most of all. Love is worth more than gold." He looked directly at Marcus as he sang. The business titan, who had faced down corporate raiders and hostile boards, shifted uncomfortably under the gaze of a 6-7-year-old boy. "That's enough, honey," Claire said gently. "You need to rest." But Oliver kept playing. "You can't buy love with a credit card? Can't heal a heart that's breaking hard all the money in the world won't fix? The time that's lost when you go—" His voice cracked on the last word, and Ethan saw tears in his son's eyes. "I think it's time for you to leave," Claire told Marcus and the lawyers. This time they didn't argue. After they left, Oliver looked at his father. "Are you going to lose your company?" Ethan smoothed his son's hair back. "Probably, but you know what? I gained something much better." "What?" "A singing partner." Ethan picked up Oliver's spare guitar. "Now, where were we with that new song we were writing?" Later that night, after Oliver had fallen asleep, Claire found Ethan in the hospital garden. "Davis Industries called," she said. "They're offering to let you stay on as a consultant if you cooperate with the takeover." "I already told them no." Claire sat beside him. "What will you do?" "I've been thinking about that." Ethan looked up at the stars. "You know all those kids who watch Oliver's videos? The ones in hospitals all over the country? What about them?" "What?" "If we started a foundation, using music therapy to help sick kids, Oliver could be the inspiration, help other children find their voice like he did." Claire was quiet for a moment. "You'd really give up everything? Start over?" "I already gave up everything once," Ethan said, "when I walked away from Oliver. I'm not making that mistake again." Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse running toward them. "Oliver's asking for you both," she said. "His fever's gone up again." They rushed back to the ICU. Oliver was awake, looking pale and scared. "I don't feel good," he whispered. "Can you sing with me, Dad? The song we wrote together." Ethan grabbed the guitar while Claire held Oliver's hand. Together, father and son sang their simple melody about second chances and never giving up, while monitors beeped and medicine dripped through IV lines. Outside the hospital, lawyers and executives were dividing up the remains of Thompson Industries. News reporters were crafting headlines about the billionaire CEO who threw it all away. But none of that mattered, because in room 507 of the ICU, a father and son were making music together, and some things were worth more than all the money in the world. "Dad?" Oliver's voice was drowsy as the medicine took effect. "Tomorrow can we write a happy song about new beginnings?" Ethan squeezed his son's hand. "Higher bet, buddy. The happiest song ever." "Good," Oliver mumbled as he drifted off to sleep, "because I think we're going to need lots of happy songs where we're going." 1 month later, Oliver's hospital room looked more like a music studio than ever. Get well cards and fan mail covered every surface. Children's hospitals across the country had been sharing his ICU sessions videos, and sick kids everywhere were asking for guitars and music lessons. "Look, Dad," Oliver pointed excitedly at his tablet. "Jessica from Memphis learned my song about hospital food. Her mom sent a video." Ethan watched the clip of a young girl in a hospital bed, bald from chemotherapy, strumming a guitar and singing Oliver's silly song about green jello. She was smiling despite the tubes and monitors around her. "You're changing lives, buddy," Ethan said proudly. The infection that had kept Oliver in ICU was finally under control. Dr. Peterson was cautiously optimistic about moving him back to a regular room soon. But everyone knew the road ahead was still long. Claire came in carrying a stack of papers. "The foundation paperwork is ready," she told Ethan. "Are you sure about this?" More sure than I've ever been about anything. Ethan had sold everything. His penthouse, his cars, his art collection. Every penny was going into the new Music Hearts Foundation, dedicated to bringing music therapy to sick children. "Oliver's Children's Music Foundation sounds better," Oliver chimed in from his bed. He was having a good day, sitting up and working on a new song. Claire smiled. "We'll think about it, but right now, someone has a surprise visitor." Miss Jenny, the music therapist, walked in carrying a beautiful new guitar. "I heard someone's been writing songs in ICU." "Miss Jenny?" Oliver tried to jump up but got tangled in his IV lines. "Careful, honey," Claire steadied him. "I brought you something special," Miss Jenny said, showing him the guitar. "This is from all the music therapists in the children's ward. We've been following your ICU sessions." Oliver ran his fingers over the shiny wood. "It's so pretty." "And that's not all," Miss Jenny continued. "The Children's Hospital Association called. They want to start a program based on your music therapy sessions. They're calling it Songs of Hope." Oliver's eyes went wide. "Really? Like in all the hospitals?" "Really?" Miss Jenny smiled. "Your father's foundation will help fund. 8. You're going to help a lot of sick kids find their music, just like you did." Oliver looked at his father. "Is that what you're doing with all your money? Helping other kids make music?" Ethan nodded. "Every penny. And you know what? It's the best investment I've ever made. Even better than your big company. Way better." Just then, Dr. Peterson came in with test results. Everyone held their breath. Good news had been rare lately. The doctor smiled. "The infection is completely gone, and the latest scan," he paused for effect, "show no signs of cancer." Claire burst into tears. Ethan hugged her without thinking, both of them caught in the moment of pure joy. "Does this mean I'm better?" Oliver asked. "It means you're in remission," Dr. Peterson explained. "We'll need to monitor you closely, but yes, right now you're better." Oliver picked up his new guitar. "I need to write a song about this." Everyone laughed, but Oliver was serious. "No, really. A happy song about being better and helping other kids and Daddy staying and everything." "First," Dr. Peterson said, "we need to talk about going home. I think you're strong enough to leave ICU tomorrow." "Home?" Oliver's face fell slightly. "But what about my ICU sessions?" "Well," Claire said, sharing a look with Ethan, We've been thinking about that. What if we turned part of the house into a recording studio? For the foundation? Oliver's eyes lit up. Really? Can we paint it with music notes and get microphones like real musicians and invite other kids to come play music too? One thing at a time. Bertie? Ethan laughed. But yes, that's the plan. Miss Jenny started teaching Oliver some chords on his new guitar, while Claire and Ethan stepped into the hallway to talk with Dr. Peterson about the care plan going forward. He'll need regular checkups, the doctor said, and there's always a chance of relapse. You need to be prepared. We will be, Claire said. Together this time. Ethan nodded. No more running away. Back in the room, Oliver was showing Miss Jenny his newest song. It's about second chances, he explained, because everybody deserves one, right, Mom? Claire looked at Ethan, who had tears in his eyes. Right, honey. And guess what? Oliver continued excitedly. Dad's learning to write songs too. He's not very good yet, but I'm teaching him. Show them, Dad. Ethan picked up the spare guitar, the one that had lived in Oliver's room for the past month. Oh, I don't know. Please? Oliver gave him the look that always worked. Play the one we wrote together about the brave kids. So there, in a hospital room that had seen so much fear and pain and hope and healing, a father and son played their song together. About brave kids fighting big battles. About finding your voice when you're scared. About second chances and never giving up. Outside, the city went about its business. Somewhere, corporate lawyers were still sorting through the remains of Thompson. Industries. News shows were still talking about the billionaire who gave it all away. But none of that mattered. Because in room 507, a new kind of empire was being built. One made of guitar strings and hope, of simple songs and second chances. And this time Ethan knew he was finally investing in something truly priceless.